Welcome back to the Leadership RIOT, where we challenge the comfortable, question the accepted, and say the things that leaders are thinking, but often won't say out loud.
At the end of our last episode, we promised to shake things up a little bit. So let's get right in there. So today we're calling out a very specific archetype. The high performer who poisons the room, the visionary who leaves wreckage in their wake, the intellectual bully everybody tiptoes around in an organization. You know exactly who we're talking about. They're often referred to as brilliant assholes.
Yeah, for sure. And they appear untouchable. They are referred to as, we can't afford to lose them player, but who quietly cost you more than they deliver. And industries have coined this phrase, brilliant assholes, but let's really call it what it really is. These people look and are bullies. So let's get honest. Are they really worth it?
Welcome to today's riot.
Yeah, Dom, this is a topic that really gets us going. And let's start with making it real and give some examples of what this looks like, because most of us had seen this play out before. So example, senior sales rep, top of the leaderboard, every quarter, always hit their numbers. On paper, they look untouchable. Behind the scenes, totally different story. They do things like hoard leads. They don't really collaborate with others very well. They tear teammates down in public meetings and take credit for other people's performance. The leaders, they knew the feedback was there, but the response never changes. Yeah, but they deliver. So within a year, imagine two strong performers leave. The trust collapses, and the deals, they get harder and harder to close because nobody wants to work with these people. And then when the numbers start slipping and revenue drops, turns out those team members that you lost were driving and delivering more than everybody admitted. Now they're gone. And guess what? Replacing them costs a lot of time and money and momentum in the recruiting and everything else, all because one person that leadership chose to protect and the behavior that they refused to address.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's look at it from a sort of a senior leader perspective. You've got a senior executive, they're smart, they're strategic, the board loves them. They say the right things at the right time, in the right rooms, perhaps a little bit manipulative, kind of schmoozing. They drive results, they lead transformation. They're seen as essential to growth. But inside the organization, it's a very different story. Perhaps they shut people down in meetings. They dismiss any views that are opposing their own. And subtly or not, they make disagreement feel unsafe. Their teams execute, but perhaps don't challenge anymore. They deliver, but they don't really think. And over time, the leadership bench starts thinning. Strong leaders leave or left or went quiet. Innovation slows down. Risk taking disappears. Everything starts funneling through one person because people are afraid to make decisions. And on paper, everything looks fine until they don't. And when an executive like that leaves, there is nobody ready to step in. There's no succession, there's no depth. It's just a vacuum and a team that's been trained not to think, not to challenge, not to lead.
I mean, that those two examples are kind of frightening when you think about it, but we know they happen all the time. And let's just call it out right now. Like every organization either has had one or is protecting one right now. And the story is always the same. Yeah, they might be difficult, but they deliver, as if performance somehow offsets behavior.
You've hit the nail on the head there. Really, performance doesn't just offset it, it signals that that behavior is acceptable. The minute you tolerate a brilliant asshole, a brilliant jerk, whatever you label them, you've made a cultural decision. You've said results matter more than respect, and how people behave isn't important. Imagine also that sometimes these people get promoted. What does that say to the rest of the organization? Because everyone in the organization sees it. You cannot promote behavior out of them.
Exactly. And often leaders love to pretend that it's a one-off exception, but it actually is never an exception. It becomes the standard actually. Everybody else is watching, and a leader should never underestimate the personal ding that their own credibility gets hit with when these behaviors are not addressed. It's often assumed that like you're weak, you're protecting them, or you're afraid of them.
100%. And let's talk a little bit more about the impact because people really underestimate the impact. One person, just one, can tank psychological safety across an entire team.
For sure.
High performers leave, collaboration drops, people start playing defense instead of offense, and suddenly your top performer is surrounded by mediocrity that they, in fact, helped create. And for goodness sake, please listen to your HR team. They know who these people are because they hear about it daily. They're probably coaching people on how to work with these assholes. And you can bet they're talking to senior leaders about these people.
And I can clearly imagine and have seen it before. Then leadership says, gee, shockingly, why is engagement down? Seemingly unaware it's because they protected the wrong person all along.
Yeah, 100%. And so why does it keep happening if the damage is so obvious? Is it because it's uncomfortable to deal with? Is it that leaders confuse skill with value? I don't know.
I think there's an element of fear here as well. Fear from the organization perspective. There's this fear of losing revenue. There's this fear of the short-term impact, the fear of not having a replacement. But let's be totally honest here. No one is irreplaceable. There's this focus on short-term impact versus long-term costs like attrition, disengagement, and lost trust is quite frankly a terrible strategy. And then from a personal perspective, a leader could be feeling like, I'm going to lose my job if I speak up here because this is such a high performer and I'm trying to change something here.
Yeah. And here's the overdue truth in all of this. If someone's behavior is eroding your culture, they're not a high performer. Full stop.
For sure.
Performance isn't just what you deliver, it's also how you deliver it. And if your definition of performance ignores that, then your culture isn't broken. It's just working exactly as you designed it.
And I'd like to add what I call the hard truth. You don't have brilliant assholes, you allow them. The moment performance excuses behavior, you've made it part of your culture.
Yeah. Let's flip it back to our listeners. Think about your organization now. Who is the person that everyone has to manage around? Who gets a pass when nobody else would? And more importantly, what message is that sending to your team as well as, directly influencing culture in the wrong direction?
Exactly. If we reflect on our past episodes, culture isn't about what's in your values deck. It isn't what you tolerate on a Tuesday afternoon. It's every time you let it slide, you're reinforcing the wrong standard. How do you recognize it before it gets bad? Look at some of the key patterns we just talked about, like people avoid working with them, or they deliver but only when it benefits them, or leaders spend so much time managing around them instead of managing them. If your team has developed coping mechanisms around one person, that's not adaptability, that's a red flag. So Dom, what do you do?
I mean, you have to address it honestly, directly and clearly, and without hiding behind performance metrics. Redefine performance to include behavior and then hold the line. And yeah, sometimes it does mean letting go of someone who looks irreplaceable on paper. The reality is, likely no one has ever told them their behavior is described by others as an asshole. I'm pretty sure nobody wakes up in the morning aiming to be a complete jerk. It often comes from a place of insecurity, a complete lack of self-awareness. Nobody's ever had this conversation before. And maybe they get energy when they put people down.
Yeah, that statement, it makes me sad actually. But here's the reality. Organizations don't struggle with brilliant assholes. They protect them. They reward results over respect, creating a culture where toxicity isn't an exception. It's an unconscious strategy, but a really, really shitty one.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about summarizing this riot, here's the real issue. Organizations continue to tolerate brilliant assholes because of their results. And that just creates an unspoken double standard where performance excuses behavior. Ultimately, that erodes trust, psychological safety, team effectiveness, and ultimately company performance.
And then if we summarize our overdue truth, if someone delivers results while wrecking your culture, they're not a high performer. They're a liability you've chosen to tolerate. And every exception that you make is a standard you're setting. They're not brilliant anythings. Quite frankly, they're just assholes.
And one last thing to leave it all here. If someone came into your organization today and watched how this person behaves, would they want to join? Would you hire them? If the answer is no, the real question is, why are they still here?
Well said. And I feel like, we've seen a lot of energy today because we're so passionate about this. And I feel like we really kind of stirred this one up, don't you?
I do, and I really look forward to having more of these conversations and shaking things up even more. See you all at the next riot.
See you at the next riot.